Hello and welcome to Just a Moment. My name is Kristen Harding. Welcome to the show. Today we're going to continue the story of the Barron Trump novels and The Last President by Ingersoll Lockwood, written in approximately 1899. There are so many like fascinating coincidences that we're going to get into a little bit later in the story. I kind of accidentally listened to a video that someone had done about what we're going to encounter later on, and I'm so glad that we're reading this together. I have not read this novel myself, so this is something that I thought maybe we could, oh, I don't know, explore together. So many people had asked me if I had read the book that I ordered it, and I thought, well, this would be interesting for those times when, like this week, my guest had to postpone because they had some issues that were way beyond their control. So, not for lack of a guest, just needing to postpone, we're going to continue with the Baron Trump novels and The Last President. And I'm just checking to see. Well, yes, we do have a few people here. Excellent. This is my part of the show where I babble for a moment. So I'm sending out my prayers and best wishes for the people down in New Orleans because it does not look like a fun Mardi Gras. It looks like there might be tornadoes and such. And up here in the Great Lakes area, we're getting some weather. So it looks like everybody's getting weather. So prayers sent out for that. Is there anything else? Let's get started. David Nash says, "Hola, señorita, señora." Oh, I haven't been señorita in a very long time. Let's see. So we are on page, believe it or not, only 46. And it's not that I'm a slow reader, it's just that these are filled with the most descriptive and flowery words. So, where we left off, they have taught Baron Trump how to basically gain sustenance from the wind, kind of like the whole breatharian movement, where there's something energetic on the wind that they are able to consume that allows them to continue. They're very, very thin, of course, but that is where they get their nutrition, is from the wind. So they were breathing. They were partaking of a soft, sweet wind, and they encouraged him to do the same. And they were delighted with his efforts. Um, they didn't want him to overdo it. And then, where we left off, they had put a necklace of beads strung upon an elastic cord on the princess to prevent her from eating too heartily. It's kind of like, wow, almost like a balloon. I can only imagine, a balloon. If it got too much, it would pop. So that kind of intrigued me. So here we are once more. So let's see. For you, Princess Pufa, on Banquet Hill, he was a very hungry man. If that were possible, he was hungrier than he was before, for the pure, fresh air and many deep breaths had made me fairly ravenous. Once more, alone with Bulger, I set to work thinking out some scheme to get a hold of more food, and by checking my alarming loss of flesh, meaning he lost weight, put an end to Queen Fuyu's plan of transforming me into a genuine wind eater and giving me the Princess Pufu for a wife. It occurred to me that possibly I might catch some fish in one of the arms of the seas nearest to the village and broil it on live embers, for I had my tinder box in my pocket. This plan worked to a charm. I soon succeeded in teaching several of the serving men to rig up a number of their war nets as a sort of seine, and I was overjoyed the first time I cast it to make a haul of a dozen or more fine sea bass. Bulger and I, or Bulger, excuse me, entered into the sport with great zeal, seizing a rope in his mouth and tugging away for dear life as we began to haul in. The next thing was to gather some dry leaves and wood and start a suitable fire to make beds of embers. Crowds of the wind eaters gathered about me and watched my movements with a sort of mixture of wonder, fear, and pleasure. Chief Zitwish was hastily summoned, but I had no difficulty in convincing him that I intended no injury to anyone, that the red tongues which he saw darting forth were perfectly harmless if they did not come into contact with one's flesh, that it would only be necessary for him to issue a command forbidding the people to approach too near to the tongues of crimson which darted from the black clouds of smoke, meaning the fire. By the time the live embers had formed, I was ready, with a dressed sea bass of about 2 pounds weight, and the cooking began. It is needless for me to assure you that Bulger and I sat down to a delightful meal, really the first satisfactory one since my arrival among the wind eaters. From this time on all went well. Every day my oyster gatherers and my fishermen made their visit to the shore to keep my larder supplied. Upon their return I was always in readiness with a fine bed of embers. So things went on for a week or so. I was delighted to find that Bulger and I were gaining flesh in a splendid style. And still, every now and then I was obliged to accept Queen Fuyu's invitation to dine with her and the Princess Pufa at the banquet hall, where I pretended to enjoy a meal on the soft and perfumed wind quite as much as they did themselves. Queen Fuyu insisted that my complexion was growing clearer and more transparent every day, and that beyond all doubt in a few months I would be able entirely to give up swallowing stones, as she called it. While I was quietly pursuing my studies of these curious people, another unfortunate occurrence took place, and this time it turned out to be very grave and serious matter. The wind eaters were not long in getting accustomed to them at first. Startling sight of the crimson tongues darting from the mouths of the black clouds. In fact, they soon learned to like the odor of the delicate morsels as they lay broiling on the embers, and when the air was chilly, didn't hesitate to form a circle around Bulger and me as we sat eating our dinner and enjoying the warmth, and to them, curious spectacle at the same time. It so happened that one evening I had left a deeper bed of embers than I had imagined. The ashes collected over them, and they continued to glow till nightfall. A band of roisterers belonging to Gowes and his faction, by the merest chance, returned homeward that night from a trip to the north shore of the island, where they had gorged themselves upon the boisterous wind of that quarter. Attracted by the glow of the remaining embers, they made haste to gather a lot of wood, threw it upon the smouldering fire, and, as the flames began to thrust out their red tongues here and there, ranged themselves in a circle to enjoy the warmth, for the night was damp and chilly. So pleasant did they find the effects of the warmth that they resolved to pass the night there, and threw themselves down on the ground as close to the fire as they deemed it prudent to go. About midnight a gentle scratching on my arm from Bulger's paw told me that something unusual had happened, for he never awakened me unless he was quite sure that the matter was serious enough to warrant him in disturbing me. I found the village in the wildest state of alarm. Ear-piercing screams from the women mingled with the deep rumbling outcries of the men. You have no doubt already guessed what had happened. The facts were simply this: in the night the cold had increased, and several of the wind eaters, half asleep, and half stupefied by the fire, by the deep draughts of the boisterous north wind, had approached closer and closer to the fire, when suddenly the vast quantity of cold air which they had swallowed began to expand, and four of them exploded with a terrific noise. In quicker time than it takes to tell it, my dwelling was surrounded by a screaming, shrieking, howling mob of wind eaters, demanding my instant death. It required all of Chief Zitwish's influence with his people to save me from being entangled in their fatal nets and beaten to death on the spot. To make matters 1,000 times worse, the bully and swagger Gowiz entered the village at this very moment with a pack of his quarrelsome hangers-on at his heels. He had been away on a secret trip to the farthest northern point of the island, where the north wind howls and roars its maddest. I had never seen him puffed up so to the very bursting point with his favorite food. When he heard of the fate which had overtaken his four comrades, his fury knew no bounds. He and his followers pounded their chest until the air quivered with deep and rumbling sounds, while ever and anon they broke out in the wildest lamentations for their dead. He openly and boldly charged Chief Zitwish with having betrayed his people and given over their once happy island to certain ruin at the hands of the little monster Thick all through, who, by his dread magic and foul mysteries, would soon bring their people to feed upon stones like himself. Day now began to break, and with the coming light the confusion in the village seemed to take on new strength. So sure was I that death was about to strike me, that I wrote out several messages to the elder baron and to the gentle baroness my mother on the leaves of my notebook, and left directions with one of the chief's serving men that in the case of my death it was my wish that he should send them to my people, whom he would find on my ship in the beautiful bay on the distant shore of the island. I said nothing about Bulger, for I knew only too well that he, if he had a choice, would die by my side. I prepared for the worst. I examined the primings of my pocket pistols and concealed my dagger under my coat at the back of my neck, where I would be better able to reach it if it came to close quarters. This done, I proceeded to cut my fingernails to sharp points as I could, for I was determined to sell my life as dearly as possible. While I felt confident of Chief Zitwish's affection for me, yet I couldn't tell at what moment he might lose courage and turn me over to the mob in order to save himself. Bulger watched all my preparations with wide opened and intelligent eyes, occasionally giving utterance to a low, nervous whine as the howling, shrieking, roaring mob surged back and forth in front of Chief Zitwish's dwelling. By the law of the land, the common people were prohibited from entering the inner enclosure of the chief's abode. But Gowiz, being one of the nobles or minor chiefs, was entitled to advance into the chief's presence and state his wrongs or make his requests. So now, the raging Gowiz, parting from his followers, who never ceased crying out for the vengeance upon the little demon Lump, who, on 2 different occasions, had spread death and destruction among their people, strode into the presence of Chief Zitwish. The chief was calm. He had not partaken of food for hours, and it says for 24 hours, so an entire day, and stood up wrinkled, creased, and seamed, as the wind eaters always looked when fasting. Near him sat Queen Fuyu and Princess Pufa, while directly behind him were ranged his three counselors, Hissa, Wurwur, and Shaboon. They were well rounded out by recent draughts of the strong and wholesome west wind, and hence looked as contented and smiling as Zitwish and Zitwish looked sad and solemn. I stood in an adjoining apartment, concealed behind a bamboo screen, with my faithful Bulger by my side. I was so placed that I could see all, without being seen myself. Chief Zitwish knew of my presence there. As Bulger caught a glimpse of the raging and bellowing Go-Wiz, he grew so nervous that I was obliged to stoop and stroke his head and let him know that I feared nothing. But the fact of the matter is, great dangers always exert a subduing influence upon me. I face them coolly but sadly, for my thoughts in such moments go back to the elder Baron and to the gentle Baroness my mother, in the far-away home 'neath the skies of the beloved fatherland. Like a huge football impelled by the kick of some gigantic foot, Go-Wiz landed in the audience chamber of Chief Zitwish. He shook his arms violently and bounded up and down with inward fury, for he was still too much beside himself with rage to utter any other sound than a deep rumbling growl or mutter. From my place behind the bamboo screen I followed, with all the keenness of sight for which I am so justly famous, every movement of the furious Go-Wiz, as well as the actions and demeanor of Zitwish, and of his counselors, for I was determined not to be caught napping in case any signs of treachery should be visible. At the very first glance, I saw that the rebellious, excuse me, that the rebellious Go-Wiz had something hidden in his girdle, and from the shape and length I knew at once that it was a flint knife. Quick as thought, I beckoned a serving man to my side and sent a message to the chief, telling the attendant to appear to be engaged in waving the branches of perfumed leaves as was his duty, while he whispered in the chief's ear. It was as follows: "Be on thy guard, O chief. The brawler hath a flint knife hidden in his girdle. He will attempt to slay thee. Be careful. Be calm." Go-Wiz had now quieted down a little, but with a voice of thunder he began his tirade. He pictured the long years of peace and happiness on their island, the blessings that they had enjoyed under the long and glorious line of rulers of which Zitwish was the worthy descendant. He thundered out defiance against all of the enemies of the Wind Eaters, and as softly as possible roared his own praises, telling of many deeds of valor he had performed in Zitwish's service, and ended by declaring himself ready and willing to die for his beloved chief. When Go-Wiz had spoken, the chief bowed his head for a few moments in silence, and then made answer. "Thou hast spoken truly and wisely, O Go-Wiz. Thou art brave. Thou hast the right to demand favor at my hands. Speak, Go-Wiz. What may Zitwish do for thee?" At these words of Zitwish, all of the former fury of Go-Wiz broke forth once more. Pounding his chest and striding up and down the audience chamber, he roared out, "That thou givest into my hands this very hour the solid demon, the dreaded man-lump, the monster, thick all through, who hath brought all this death and ruin into our peaceful land." Chief Zitwish was silent for a few moments. Need I tell you that my very heart listened for a reply? I could hear nothing but the deep, coarse, grating sound of Go-Wiz's breath as I leaned forward to catch the first word which should fall from the chief's lips. It seemed a lifetime. At length Zitwish spoke. My brother, thou art inflamed with the deep draughts of the fierce and raging north wind. Thou art beside thyself. Thou seest not clearly. I must not adjudge death except when the decree will rest on the laws of our Father. True, the little man thick all through hath been the cause of great misfortune to our people, but the innocent cause. He has not striven or desired to harm us. He is a lover of peace, a friend of his kind. My followers were warned of the danger of the crimson tongues. The man lumps did not seek their death, and full well too thou knowest that the laws of our Father bid us to hold the lives of our guest as sacred as the texture of our skin. Go thy way, therefore, Gowiz. I cannot doom the man lump to his death. Is this, roared the disappointed leader, the kind of justice which thou givest to my people? Aye, it is, thou brawler, replied Chief Zitwish, now fast losing control over himself. Hold thy peace and depart, lest in my wrath at thy frequent wrongdoing I give thee over to merited punishment. Merited punishment. There we go. All right. Begone, I say, was Zitwish's calm but stern reply. Go thou first, then, traitor to thy people, thundered out Gowiz, springing forward with the flint knife raised high in the air. Cries of terror burst from those gathered in the audience chamber, but Chief Zitwish calmly brought forth his hand and touched the would-be assassin. With a deafening crack, the body of the raging Gowiz flew into 1,000 pieces. Like a huge balloon seized by the hands of the tempest and whirled against the spear-like branches of some shattered oaken monarch of the plain. Queen Fuyu and Princess Pufa, bewildered and terror-stricken, clung to each other, while silent fear sat on the faces of those around the chief. But he was calm and spoke a few words in a mild and steady voice to the queen and the princess. When the people learned of Gowiz's attempt to slay their ruler and how the brawler, at the very instant he lifted the flint knife to strike, had been mysteriously stricken dead at Zitwish's feet, they sent up a loud huzzah, for the fierce Gowiz was more feared than loved even by his followers. It required several days for the village of the Wind Eaters to quiet down and take on its everyday look after the mysterious death of Gowiz, but with his disappearance vanished all opposition to Chief Zitwish's rule. The people firmly believed that it was the avenging spirits of the air who touched the brawler with their sword points when he raised his hand against their ruler. I need hardly tell you that the chief's gratitude to me knew no bounds. No gifts were too beautiful or too costly to be offered to me, and the fact that I declined them all only seemed to strengthen his affection for me. But how dared I, reject the gift of the hand of the princess, Pufa? To do this would be to undo all that I have done, to make Zitwish my enemy, to transform his love into hate, his confidence into suspicion, possibly to write my own death warrant. There was but one course left for me to pursue. and that was to escape. Well, hello, I see some comments. Hi, Tina. Hi, David. Hi, Daryl. We are just continuing the Baron Trump collection, and he's escaping. And so, page 51, and escape too it must be at once, before I had lost the chief's confidence. One of Zitwish's first acts after his rescue from the flint knife of the murderous Gowes was to restore me to the tiny instrument, was to restore to me the tiny instrument with the invisible point. Ha ha! Now we know what had happened. This done, a terrible load seemed to be lifted from his mind. He became himself again, and with his returning happiness and content came a still stronger desire to hasten my marriage with the Princess Pufa. With the greatest caution, I made this and that excuse, in order to gain time to collect my thoughts and settle upon some sure plan of escape, for recapture I knew meant death, or worse than death, imprisonment, until I should consent to give up all desire to leave the island of the wind eaters and pledge myself to become, so far as nature would permit, one of their people. Cautious as I was, my excuses awakened suspicion. The first proof of this was to find that orders had been given to cut off my supply of fish. Queen Fuyu was afraid that so long as I was permitted to have all the solid food I wanted, I would not grow thin enough to be content with my air diet, and therefore not satisfied to make my home among them for the rest of my life. The next thing to happen to me was to find my supply of oysters and mussels reduced one half by orders of Fuyu. This meant yield or starve. It struck me like a bolt out of the clear sky, but it has always been just blows as this which have throughout my life aroused me to calm, quick, intelligent action. I hesitated no longer. My plan reached perfection in a single moment. When nightfall came, I hastily scrawled a few lines addressed to my sailing master, telling him of the fate which threatened to overtake me, and bidding him arm a few trusty men and hasten to my rescue. This I tied to the collar of my loved and faithful Bulger. He covered my hands with caresses, and I held him clasped in my arms for an instant while the tears fell hot and fast. Then I softly opened the door of my bamboo lodge. The night was bright and glorious. "Away, my beloved Bulger," I whispered, stooping and pressing my lips for the last time on his silken ears and shapely head. "To the ship, away!" He paused, looking into my face, gave a low whine as if to say, "Aye, little master, I understand," and away he sprang like the wind. For an instant I could follow him with a long and sturdy bound as he sped along, and then he was gone. The next morning, to my utter astonishment, I was informed that all the preparations for the marriage of the Princess Pufa and the little man Thickalthrough were completed, and that the feasting and merrymaker would begin the day following. This piece of news, startling as it was, I received with perfect calmness. I completely disarmed all suspicion by my apparent satisfaction with the bright prospect of becoming the son-in-law of the great Chief Zitwish. I searched my pockets for trinkets to bestow upon the light and airy Pufa. Queen Fuyu was not visible. So great had been the joy of her mother's heart that in a moment of weakness she had partaken too greedily of the rich but unwholesome east wind, and was now suffering from a fearful attack of dyspepsia. This was a most fortunate thing for me, for I am quite certain that Queen Fuyu would never have consented to allow me to return to my apartments that night. There was now but one thing left for me to do, and that was to make for the distant sea coast where I had left my ship and crew. And it's time for our little break.
Looking for breathtaking photography that speaks for itself? Whether it's the raw beauty of nature, the sleek professionalism of corporate imagery, or the infinite wonders of the sky, Donovan Pudoka captures it all. With over 10 years of experience, Donovan's lens doesn't just take pictures, it tells stories. His work is perfect for travel publications, corporate branding, artistic prints, or anyone who appreciates stunning photography. If you need high-quality images that elevate your project, Donovan Pudoka delivers. Have we sparked your interest in Donovan's work? Check it out at matrixminds/Pudoka. My eye promises you, you will not be disappointed.
This CBD fluid is a whole flower fluid extracted from the cannabis flower. We don't use any heat, butane, or chemicals when we extract, so we get all of the components of the plant. All the CBD, CBG, CBA, all the terpenes, all the flavonoids. This allows our body to absorb at 60 to 90% rather than the average of 6 to 10% absorption you would get with a CBD oil. Because our bodies are made up of mostly water and this is a fluid, it's highly absorbable so that you're getting 500% more nutraceuticals per dose. We also have this available in our CBD spray as well as a muscle rub with all kinds of botanicals. You're going to absolutely love it.
Check it out, Brainiacs. matrixminds.live/CBD. CBD I use. Feel free again. Feel alive again.
Hey there, Hunter. Go check out our friends at Colorado Custom Game Calls. They are all about creating a high-quality, custom, unique game calls at an affordable price. They are here for hunters that can't and won't pay upwards of $180 to $200 per game call. They pride themselves on giving their customers the opportunity to not only purchase an affordable and high-quality call, but to customize their game call to their liking. So listen up and go check them out. That's www.coloradocustomgamecalls.com. They got calls for all type of game, and all the game calls can be custom made to your own likeness. That's www.coloradocustomgamecalls.com. Tell them Matthew sent you from the Matrix Minds.
What is up, all my beautiful and gorgeous souls? I am Michelle Espinosa, otherwise known as the Shaman, through the Matrix Mind Media. So tell me, how many times have you wished that you had that special power of prediction? You know, to know what was going to happen before it actually happened and took place. To have some power and control over that situation before things came flying at you out of left field. The thing is, you actually can have that power. You can be aware of what's coming. Tune in to Astrology TV with me for Breaking the Cage every Sunday evening at 10 p.m. Eastern on the Matrix Mind Media. And I will go through the astrology and help put you on the right course and get you back in control of your own life. Love you guys.
He's not going to eat the dog, David. He's not. Sorry, I got a phone call. I hate it when that happens. It's usually just a buy this or a buy that. Sorry about that, though. Oh, let's see. Where were we? So he was escaping, right? He left his ship and crew. Yep, okay. And start that very night. Let's see. And start to that very night. As ill luck would have it, Chief Zitwish, noticing that a delightfully strong west wind had begun to blow, insisted upon having a sort of preliminary feast about sundown. I was invited to join the party. Not daring to refuse, I set out with the merrymakers and not only tired myself out by making frantic efforts to fill myself with their invisible food, but it was nearly midnight before the village grew perfectly quiet, and everybody seemed to have closed the doors and the windows of the dwelling. But, after all, the rioting of the wind-eaters was a fortunate thing for me. They went to bed so gorged with many and deep draughts of the hearty and filling west wind that they slept like logs, if you will allow me to compare puff-balls to solid wood. I waited until the rumbling of the voices had died away, as the last group of roisterers broke up and the solitary wind-eaters, scattered along the streets, disappeared one by one into their bamboo dwellings. Leaving my door fastened on the inside, I sprang lightly through the window, and under the cover of the deep shadows made my way unnoticed to the outskirts of the town. Here I broke into a sharp run, for at very most I would have but 6 hours' start of the wind-eaters, and that was far too little, for, as I have already told you, they flit along like phantoms, especially when in a fasting condition, and even when pretty well filled, are very swift of foot, more especially if the air be quiet so as not to impede their advance. On and on I sped, with a desperate resolve to make such good use of my start as to make it impossible for them to overtake me. To my horror, after about an hour's run, I noticed that my legs were beginning to tire. This was a terrible blow to me. For a few moments I staggered along, half unconscious of where I was, whither I was hastening, and of the awful danger threatening me. All at once the truth of the matter broke upon me. I was but the wreck of my former self. The long months of fish diet had robbed my muscles of that wonderful strength and elasticity which was once my pride and my chief dependence in moments of peril. Frail as I had grown, my legs now bent beneath me. Slower and slower grew my pace. My heart seemed to swell and shut out the very breath of life. On, ever onward, I toiled with desperate effort to escape my pursuers, whose rumbling voice, it seemed to me, were faintly booming in the distance. But nature would do no more. I reeled, I staggered, I stopped, I fell. How long I lay there I know not, but when I came to myself I could feel plainly the change in the air which tells of the coming day. The rippling of the brook fell on my ear. I dragged my aching body in the direction the sound came from. A deep pull at the cool, clear water of the brook refreshed me somewhat. I attempted to rise, but oh, new loss of hope, to discover that my joints had stiffened while sleeping on the ground, uncovered, yes, even ill-clad, for I had left one piece of my clothing hanging on the window-sill of my lodge in the village to quiet any suspicion which might arise in the minds of the serving men. Thoughts of home, however, of the elder baron, of the gentle baroness my mother, of my loved Bulger, fitted through my fevered brain, and prompted me to make one more effort to regain my feet and escape death at the hands of Chief Zitwish's enraged people, who would soon be bounding along uphill and down dale like spirits of the wind as they were. A groan escaped my lips as I rose to my feet. So lifelike points, so like knife points, in my joints were the pains which shot through my frame. But I must try to be up and away, even though the effort costs me 1,000 agonizing twinges. I owe it to the loved ones at home to push on till I fall utterly broken, till, like a stricken beast robbed of the power to stand, I should topple and fall at the feet and the mercy of my pursuers. Such were the thoughts which oppressed my poor reeling brain. A terrible mystery, a torturing dream weighed me down. I still had my mind. I could see, I could feel, I could hear, And why should I not rise and move onward and away from the certain death which hovered over me? Crazed by such thoughts, I struggled to my feet and staggered along, sending forth a groan with every step. But I had steeled myself to the task and dragged myself along, still oppressed by some strange and mysterious power, which gave to every pebble the rock's size, and widened every gully to a yawning chasm, on the brink of which I paused in sickening fear of the plunging into some black abyss. And yet, oh joy! Gradually the films faded from my eyes, the mysterious power lifted its spell from my brain, and I felt more like myself. I saw clearer, my step grew firmer. Now at last I thought all is going well, when suddenly a long blue gray streak of light flashed along overhead of the hills in the far distant eastern sky. It was the signal of morning. Again with a groan I sank on my knees, caught myself, rose half dazed, pressed on again, slowly, slowly, every step jarring on my heated brain like a hammer's blow, but still onward, onward. A terrible grip, as of some giant's hand, palm of iron and fingers of steel, set itself on my very vitals. The thought that even now my escape was known to my enemies, that the phantom wind-eaters, armed with their nets and clubs, were flitting out the streets of Chief Zitwish's village, charged to carry me back alive to a worse death than death itself, or slay me for having broken faith and set the face of honesty over my fraud and deceit, seemed to paralyze my limbs and rob me of the little strength that I had left. Still, on and ever onward I struggled, like one in the dull stupor of the wine cup. Fast, ah, too fast, that streak of grey dawn lengthened and widened, and the orb of day shot through the morning shadows, a messenger of light here and there, now weak and fitful, now stronger and farther reaching. I saw them, I felt them, for in my dread of them they seemed to flash towards me and strike my half-closed eyes, as if knocking at the windows of my soul and rousing me to move out of death's harm. For a brief moment I halted, as if expecting some fond, familiar voice to ring in my ears. It came. It was the gentle Baroness, my mother. Gently, softly, sweetly, that well-known voice came floating on the morning air, bidding me take heart, calling me by name, just as in childhood days, and saying, "My baby, my boy, my son, my darling, rouse thee, press on, press quickly." And then I took heart. The fearful clamp set upon my breast relaxed its hold, and I could feel my strength returning. But oh, so slowly, so slowly. Still, it was on its way back at last. I could feel my feet growing lighter. With some effort, I quickened my pace almost to a run. On and on I sped, now every instant giving me new strength, every motion sending the warm blood tingling to my fingers' ends. The spell had been lifted. I was myself again. Swifter and swifter my pace quickened, until I flew along as in days of old, when with ease I had left all corners far behind me. Methought I could almost hear the plash, not splash, okay, of the waves on the snow-white sands of that beautiful harbor where my good ship lay. On and ever onward I sped with a new and mysterious strength. I was astounded at my own deeds. I was almost afraid. So fast I was bounding along, lest again some demon of air should touch my limbs and stay my course. But hark! Didn't you hear that deep rumble? The sky is clear. It cannot have been the voice of the storm fiend. Ha! Again, deeper and clearer than before, that hoarse, low, muttering rumble, half roar, half growl, comes borne along on the wings of the awakened breeze. Lost, lost, lost. It's the cry of the pursuers. It is the voice of the enemy. Those children of the air are on my track. They follow me with leap and jump. What madness to think that I could outrun them. Let me halt and die like a man. Look how they bound along over the plain. Swift and noiseless are their steps. Phantoms they are. I halt, I turn, I grasp my firearm too late. A score of entangling nets envelop me. I struggle only to entwine myself the more. Arms, hands, legs, feet are twisted in wretched confusion. I sway, fall, roll over, wrapped round and round in that dreadful tangle. And now, upon my defenseless body comes a rain of sharp stinging blows. Deep rumbling cries fill the air and keep time in a wild way with the shower of blows rained on my face, my head, and my hands. As they continue, they seem to increase in strength. The pain, bearable at first, now becomes excruciating. The light goes out of my eyes, swollen shut as they are beneath this cruel pelting. 1,000 ringing sounds assail my ears. My brain reels. I am going, going, dying. When, hark, again! You cannot hear it. Your ears would not know it, but mine do. Mine do. 'Tis Bulger's bark, and I am saved. Faster and faster the wind eaters ply their clubs. I do not heed them. I do not feel them now. For nearer and nearer comes that joyous music. 'Tis here. I am strong again. I rise half up. My lips move. I speak. I cry out. Quick, good Bulger, or all is lost. A single glance at the terrible plight of his little master tells him all. With a howl of rage, his dark eyes shooting flame, he throws himself upon the heels of the wind eaters. His sharp teeth pierce like needles. Crack! Again and again he sends his fangs through the skin of the wind eater. Crack, crack, crack! Their clubs cease swinging. A cry of horror goes up. As for the fourth time, good Bulger's teeth pierce the heel of a wind eater and sends his body with a loud report to vanish into thin air. They turn, they break away in wild dismay. They fly for their lives, casting away their clubs and abandoning their victim. I could see no more. It grew black, a vertigo seized me. I tried to free my hands to touch my loved Bulger, for death I thought had come. When life came back, Bulger was licking my hands and face and whining piteously. He had gnawed the netting free from the limbs of his master. With a cry of joy and a burst of tears, I caught that faithful, loving creature to myself, and at that instant distant shouts came floating over the hills. They came from my sailing master and his relief party. I could not answer, but Bulger raised his head and sent forth a few sharp barks to tell them where we were. In a short half hour they were at my side. After my bruised face and hands had been bathed in cool water, and I had swallowed a few mouthfuls of wine, I felt strong enough to get on my feet, and move slowly forward. Bulger walked proudly by my side, pausing ever and anon to look me in the face, meaning to ask, "How goes it with thee, little master?" Once on shipboard, strengthened by good food and cheered by the comforts of my cabin, I was not long in getting my health back again. After a week's rest, I gave orders to weigh anchor and turn our good ship to head northward, for I was anxious, very anxious, to see the elder baron and the gentle baroness my mother, and tell them all about the wonderful things that I had seen. Oh my goodness, we're starting chapter 6 already. And we are on page 56, and I've got about 10 more minutes. See if there's any more comments here, the new ones. I think that the reason that they try to tie this book to Baron Trump and to the current Trump family is that it is just very unusual that there would be a Baron Trump and that it would be written about in 1899. So if that answers your question, I don't know. I think it's a stretch, but when people try, they can accomplish anything, even if it's not accurate. But that's why we're reading it, to find out what this is all about. So, chapter 6. Upon my return from my first journey to faraway lands, the elder baron and his faithful spouse, my beloved mother, followed by all the retainers of the household, met Bulger and me at the outer gate and welcomed us home with that wild and boisterous joy which only German hearts are capable of. The elder baron threw his arms around my neck, and forgetful of the fact that I was only half his size, lifted me completely off the ground, in the unreasoning joy of his father's heart, nearly throttling me. I kicked vigorously, but the soft felt soles of my oriental shoes prevented me from giving him to understand that he was fast choking me to death. At last, my thoughtful mother noticed that I was growing black in the face, and laying hold of my legs pulled me downward out of the dangerous embrace in which the elder baron had wrapped me. Not, however, until my father's Nuremberg egg had bored painfully into my protuberant brow. Say that 4 times fast, I dare ya. Adding another bump to that already bumpy territory. Upon noticing, the elder baron dispatched an attendant to his apartment with orders to search his medicine chest for a bottle of volatile liniment. In his eagerness to undo the harm that he had inflicted, he poured a stream of the acrid liquid into my eyes, causing me intense suffering. This red and inflamed condition of my eyes, however, the tenants and retainers attributed to my emotion upon entering the baronial hall once more after so long an absence. I didn't regret this little accident at all, for while I am opposed to that ready-made style of emotion which some people always keep on hand, I have no objection to a noble and dignified use of tears. It is needless to say that everybody was delighted to see Bulger. They all found that he had increased in size, beauty, and intelligence. He received all this homage with a dignity that was charming to behold. To impress the crowd with a due sense of that discipline and self-control which he acquired as the constant companion and confidant of his master, he absolutely refused to touch the many tidbits and dainty morsels which the retainers offered him, and gazed with utmost indifference at the other dogs in their mad scramblings for the food which he had declined. I was very proud of him. In a few days everything had settled down to its wonted quiet again beneath the baronial roof. Evenings I passed giving accounts of the many wonderful things I had seen while abroad. To these sittings a few of the older and more confidential household servants were admitted. My mother arranged them in a semicircle behind the chairs of the elder baron and his guests. I, with Bulger by my side, occupied a dais either seated by the side of the table holding my curiosities, or standing in front of my auditors in an easy position while I held them spellbound by my narration. There was one thing that worried me, and it was this. How will the elder baron receive the announcement of my intention to leave home again ere many moons? To my great surprise and delight, he didn't even wait for me to make known my intentions. While seated in my library one day, poring over a very rare book of travels which I had just purchased, a gentle tap at the door caused Bulger to raise his head and growl. "Come in," said I. It was the elder baron. "I disturb you," he began. "You have that right, Baron," I replied with a gracious smile. "Be seated, pray." And saying this, I arranged the pelt of a very beautiful and rare animal which I had found abroad, so as to make a comfortable seat for the elder baron on the canopy. "My son," said the baron, I come to bring thee this little token from our gracious master the emperor." I looked up. He held in his hands the insignia of the Grand Cross of the Crimson Cincture. I laid the bauble on the table. "Little baron," continued my father, "I am well pleased with thee." I made a low obeisance, which is a bow. "Thy marvelous adventures fill all mouths. Thou hast set a new lustre on the family name, and I come to rouse thee from thy apparent sloth. Thou must be up and doing. Thou must shake off this indolence which will gain an increased power over thee each passing hour. New triumphs await thee. Go forth once more. Turn aside out of the beaten paths. Seek the wonderful and the marvelous. But ere thou settest forth, ponder the contents of this parchment roll. Many years ago, when the down of manhood first came upon my cheek, and before life's burdens had come to lie heavily on my soul, I found it in the damp and noisome vaults of an ancient Roman convent, which the pestilential air of an encroaching marsh had emptied of its inmates. It may turn thy footsteps towards something strange and interesting. Concealing with difficulty the joy occasioned by my father's words and the earnestness to know the contents of the parchment roll, I returned the elder baron's salutation with marked respect, and he withdrew. I need not assure the reader of the almost breathless anxiety which I unrolled that volume. It was in the Latin tongue, and it was the work of a scribe. The ink had faded somewhat, but even in places where it had entirely disappeared, I could, by the aid of a strong lens, readily trace out words by lines scratched into the parchment by the point of the reed pen. It was a copy of an ancient Roman newspaper, or Acta Diurna, and bore a date corresponding to our 45th year before the present era. Caesar was at the height of his power. Peace reigned, the arts flourished. Rome, the center of the world, was the home of a glory and magnificence far beyond anything the eyes of man had yet gazed upon. The contents of this copy of the Acta Diurna were largely made up of detailed accounts of a famous trial just completed at Rome, in which 7 noted sculptors had been found guilty of poisoning a beautiful maiden named Paula, after they had each completed a statue of her, in order that no other sculptors could ever be able to make use of her for that same purpose. Huh. The judges had pronounced the sentence of death upon them, but in consideration of their splendid service in beautifying the imperial city, Caesar had changed their punishment from death to lifelong exile. Well, that's good, I guess, but they still killed her. The 7 sculptors had been transported in an imperial gallery to a far-away island in the southern seas. As stated in this copy of the Acta Diurna, it was the most remote piece of land belonging to the Roman Empire, lying to the southward. Ad insulum remotissimum imperii Romani media norem. As an additional act of this imperial clemency, the wives and the children of the condemned sculptors had been graciously accorded permission to follow their husbands and fathers into their terrible exile. And my goodness, we are already at the end. I am going to mark this at the end of their exile. And we'll start it up again the next time I do not have a guest. So that is all the time I have for now, dear lights. Thank you so much for joining us. Never forget that you are amazing, you are loved. Be well, be safe out there, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.